evening, Oman and Dr. Rana. It is such a privilege to talk to you from all across the world, from Silicon Valley to the amazing world of Dubai. And you are truly an inspirational entrepreneurial couple, taking
Thank
on all kinds of challenges to change the world. And so we are all interested in listening to your journey from being an audiologist. First of all, I have to ask you, how did you find this pretty lady and intelligent lady? And not that you don't deserve it, of course you do, but I just want to know. And then secondly, obviously, you come from the corporate world. She comes from the human kindness angle of enabling people to hear better. And now she has transformed that hearing, as I see, to hearing not just of the people who cannot hear, but also to the underprivileged who are not heard. So that is an incredible transformation and a responsibility. And so please just introduce to the readers the amazing couple that you are. Either way, whoever goes first, doesn't matter.
Ladies first.
Thank you. Nicely
Ladies
said.
first.
Thank you. Nicely said, Sanjeev. I never really made the connection that way, that the underprivileged are also unheard. So and their voices aren't heard. So thank you for that. That was nice.
So introduction.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Rana Batterjee. I usually introduce myself as Rana, just plain. I don't see myself the way others see me. And so I'm very casual, mainly about anything and everything. You can ask me any question and I'll give you my best answer. Mazen and I met over almost 30 years ago.
28 years.
28 years ago.
She always forgets.
Yes, that's another thing. I forget our anniversary, but he's the one who always remembers. And we always tell people that our marriage was, because we're from Saudi Arabia, they always ask, oh, was your marriage arranged? And I always say yes, and we're the ones who arranged it. So it took us about 3 days, but we came up with an agreeable, mutually acceptable terms and conditions. And
You mean he agreed to your terms? Mutually
Yes.
acceptable terms. I know that.
One-sided negotiation. That was if you agree, sign on the dotted line. That's so yeah.
yeah, maybe it went a little bit like that, but.
So we do come from, we both come from Saudi Arabia, but we had different paths. So Rana was actually born in the U.S., raised in Saudi for all through high school and first year of university, then came to Washington, D.C. for university. I'm the other way around, born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and then at 13, 14, went to the U.S. with the family, started and finished out high school, too many years in university, and started off my life there, ended up being there 23 years, all in Washington, D.C. And then we moved back with our children back in 2003 and carried on in Saudi Arabia for about a year, and then moved to Dubai in 2003 and have been here ever since. So as you mentioned, Sanjeev, we've got quite a mixed background between Rana's clinical audiology, 20 plus years experience, with myself about 20 plus years in the corporate world, primarily in IT and telecommunications, both in the US and back here in the Middle East. And then for the past 12 years, we have been entrepreneurs. For the first 6, Rana was not involved in the day-to-day, although she was a co-founder of the business. And then the last 6 years, she's been involved in the operations on a full-time basis. And just to kind of get the conversation flowing, I typically say that I became an entrepreneur by necessity, okay, not by choice. So
by necessity or by passion? Was it
right?
by necessity or by passion, Mazen?
No, absolute necessity.
Absolutely.
So 12 years ago was right at the beginning of the last economic crisis of 2008. And at that time, I had been in a large regional company that I had helped build to about $2+ billion in revenues in 3 years. It was, a massive journey, and then that company collapsed overnight just before the economic crisis. We had decided to take out a second mortgage on our house to invest in the real estate market, which was red hot at the time in Dubai. So by the time we got that mortgage processed and got the equity release, the economic crisis hit and the stock market crashed. So we were stuck with triple our mortgage, some cash in the bank that was borrowed, and no place to invest it. And the company I was working with literally collapsed in the span within 2-3 months. So I was out of a job, had to do something, and that's how I became an entrepreneur.
I was working at the hospital at the time as director of a cochlear implant center, but the income that I was making wasn't enough to cover the mortgage and put 3 kids through school. So we're tough times.
So you both are, I would call, destined entrepreneurs. Huh? The
Yes,
destined.
I think it's in the genes, but actually, it's quite funny. I always struggled with until very recently, and I mean like only within the last 6 months that I've become comfortable with being introduced as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, because of the corporate world, it's quite a change. Dr. Batterjee, are you Bengali?
No, I'm actually from Saudi Arabia, and it's funny. I get that question a lot. Specifically, they ask me if I am Bengali.
Yeah,
So
because the Batterjees, they come from the Bengal, as you can already know. So thank you for.
So my last name is Batterjee. There are many stories to where the last name came from. So one of them is that my, great grandfathers came from Saudi Arabia, and they had like 3 brothers. So maybe one of them had gone to India and come back.
Or got lost in some kind of an event like the Indian movies predicted.
Some drama.
And also the root of the word comes from batter, which means amputation. So
I see.
And then also Turkish, or it could have been.
And in this part of the world, the roots can be multi.
Yes, can be anything. That's correct.
And like I said in the beginning, though, the world is a much smaller place.
Yes,
but,
yes.
We visited India, and we love it very much. So.
Beautiful country. Beautiful country. Beautiful.
Well, the world comes to see Dubai, you go to see India. So that's a great exchange of currencies, right? So one of the questions that I have for you and Omair is to understand from your definition, who now in your evolution of things should be called an entrepreneur?
You mean in general, who do we see?
Yes, now that you look at entrepreneurship, because you were evolved to it, who now, looking back, should be called an entrepreneur?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And please call me Mazen. No need to call me by my last name.
Okay, no problem.
Entrepreneur, I think reflecting on that, I would say that yes, everybody that had been introducing me and referring to me as an entrepreneur was correct, because my perspective now is anybody who is inspired by a need or necessity or desire to start a venture of any size, scale, or scope, and is willing to commit themselves to that and make a go at it to try to make it successful and work, is an entrepreneur. Ultimately, an entrepreneur is someone who is going to take the initiative to make an idea turn it into reality.
And convince the people around them that this is a good idea and this is what we all should be doing.
Yes. Well, I see the passion in deployment. Nice word, by the way.
Thank you.
It fits exactly the mission it has. So a part of when you created this, and I know your journey because I have had the privilege of reading about it. Could you briefly share, uh, Dr. Batterjee, your journey, and Mazen, your journey briefly, just so that people know who you really, how you inspired, became evolved to be entrepreneurs?
Specifically with edge deployment.
Specifically, your journey from, now you told me about the break and why you became an entrepreneur.
Right.
And uh, if Dr. Rana, if I may call you so,
No,
please, yours is an interesting also, truly, when he says in the first 6 years, you franchised a sweet shop, and then you fulfilled the dreams of girls coming into the stores with the memories of how to create these sweet things. And then as a young generations of the girls, you promised them to be the second franchisees. And it's a very interesting outcome as you lived through it, from the being an audiologist to the today's world of being an entrepreneur. So please share that evolution.
Let me frame it into three phases. So the initial phase was, we started, picking up from the break of the last corporate job with the economic crisis, and I was looking for employment and networking, and speaking to one of my friends, very close friends, and asking him for referrals for anybody hiring. And as close as we are, he'd never knew what my compensation was, so he asked me, and I told him, and he started laughing. And I was quite insulted because I was a big shot executive, and he started laughing at me like, all this crazy work and travel you do. So my ego was quite bruised.
I can see that, right.
My ego was quite bruised. And then he said, listen, just open up a couple of Subway restaurants and you might make more than that. And he was and is the development agent for Subway, responsible for the franchising. So, being the corporate snob that I was at the time, I said,
Yes.
you can't make money selling sandwiches. I mean, that's like small time mom and pop, stuff. And, needless to say, he showed me a bunch of numbers, and we looked through it and started assessing it. And we now have this liability of a mortgage that needed to be satisfied. So we decided to take the risk of starting a couple of restaurants, Subway restaurants, and see how it goes, and until I find a job, and then that becomes something we can leave behind for the kids. Obviously, because of the crisis, nothing materialized on the job front, and went full force onto the development of our Subway restaurants, which has continued for the past 12 years with its own challenges and ups and downs, as you can imagine. So that's the first, let's say, trimester, if you want, of entrepreneurial journey. The second trimester was when Rana decided to join the business operationally. And I'll let Rana tell that part of the story, and then I'll come back and talk about the third trimester.
So during that time, I'd already spent 20 years in audiology and built my career to a point where my schedule was fully booked 3-4 weeks in advance, and I was in such demand that I would get the most complicated cases in cochlear implants, which is a medical device that restores hearing for deafness. And so I was doing very well in my career in audiology, but I felt like I wasn't fulfilling the values that I had in the beginning. So I found myself, although an amazing, well sought after audiologist, I really wasn't present for my family or for my children, and I really wasn't turning into the person that I wanted to be. So I decided I needed a career shift, and I decided to join Mazen full-time in the business. A lot of people in the audiology industry look at me and say, how could you have ever left? But I see that I continued to do the same thing I sought after, is to actually impact lives and touch people's lives. So when I joined Mazen, we were doing Subway fully. We were employing people who couldn't find jobs. We were training them. They were able then to uplift themselves and their families. So there was impact, but I never felt like it was enough. I wanted more impact. So our dream was always, during that time, was to build our food and beverage company to a point where we were making enough revenue that we could start a charity, and then with that charity, help people. And when I started, we first joined Mazen full time, I realized that we needed to diversify, and that's why we had the idea of opening up the candy store. The candy store has a little bit more of an emotional factor because it's all about making and creating sweet memories, impressions that might last for a very long time for people and their families. It's inclusive of everyone of all ages, and it's just a really amazing place to be in. And I'm very proud of what we created. But then that wasn't enough either.
Well, yeah, I'll pick it up from there and say, it wasn't enough, not necessarily from a financial perspective, because, while we can, say that we've been, humbly, moderately successful, our business is provided for our families. We're not, thanks to God, we have not, achieved massive wealth from it, and that's never really been the objective, but it's been a good living for us. But that gets us to kind of the third trimester of the journey to date, which is, how a deployment came about. And being both of us lifelong learners, we've always, we never stop learning. And part of that learning journey for us was joining an organization called the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization of entrepreneurs of a certain size. It's a networking learning platform, and we've been involved with that. For the last 6 years, I sit on the board. I'm quite active in that. And during an event that we're having here in Dubai back in November 2019, one of the speakers that was on stage was a gentleman who had spent most of his time or his career in the NGO space, right? Different charities and NGOs around the world. And he presented this concept where he was basically saying that as entrepreneurs, we could solve a world problem and generate profit, and the two are not mutually exclusive. For me, that was like somebody invented water on stage. It was the first time I thought of that. To us, it was always, when we achieve a certain amount of profitability or revenues, we'll start a foundation, support people's education, et cetera, but not until then. And what this gentleman was talking about is that we could come up with a purpose that accomplishes both. That was a revelation for us. I had a moment on that stage, and I basically looked at Rana and I said, we need to find our purpose.
The funny thing is that we were both thinking about it at the same time. So as we were listening to this gentleman on stage, the thoughts through my mind were, how are we going to do this? We'd already thought through several ways and methods of generating enough, of taking from our revenue to do charity. So all these thoughts were in my mind. I thought, I need to have this discussion again with Mazen. And then I look over and his head was bent down. And I thought, maybe he's fallen asleep. He's not interested in what the speaker is saying.
I was having a moment.
And then as soon as he lifted his head, he looked at me and he said, we have to do something. And I thought, oh, really? That's exactly what I was thinking. So
the feeling was that, I said, look, I said, if we can figure out what our purpose is, and that comes from within us, it's not something that we adopt, but a purpose that emanates from within us. It's an alignment with who we are. Knowing what we're capable of, we would be unstoppable in achieving that purpose. But we got to figure out what that purpose is. While our current businesses, whether it's the Subway restaurants or the candy store, we could retrofit some purpose-like words through of, making sweet memories for people or feeding them healthy food, etc. The honest purpose of that business is financial survival for our family, right? And of course we do as much good as we can in the process, but we need to figure something else out. Then later on in that same afternoon, a second speaker was on stage, and he happened to be a prince from Nigeria, which is a country that we knew about, existed, but didn't know much about. And he was talking about the country and the challenges that they have. He was a governor of one of the states there as well. And he mentioned that the 200 million population and 80% poverty rate. which was just astounding, right? You know, a country with 80% poverty rate. And then he proceeded to talk about, very eloquent gentleman, about, you know, all the different initiatives at a government level to bring in foreign direct investment, et cetera, which, you know, we listened to and said, okay, fantastic, you know, initiatives, but the problem is massive. Later on that evening, those two events kind of sparked the idea in our head of saying, you know, there's massive poverty around the world. You don't need to do a lot of research to know that. A lot of these countries that have the high levels of poverty have very limited job opportunities for their citizens. Their best option to get employment, decent pay, and break their poverty cycle is to get employment abroad in economies that have better job opportunities. So then the challenge was, well, how could we put those two things together? How could we use our experience? How could we use technology advancements today to solve this problem? And from that, the idea of eduployment was born a little over 9 months ago, of saying we will try to solve this problem with technology, marrying up these two variables of saying go into countries where there's, you know, significant poverty, limited job opportunities, engage those candidates using technology, using their smartphones, you know, increasing penetration of smartphone devices in the underprivileged population specifically, it's increasing. So we can actually get access to them, engage them in their local language or vernacular or dialects so that it is accessible to them. Because most of them, as we looked at the problem and researched it, most of them do not speak English, which is an essential requirement for employment abroad. And also as a skill, English unlocks a multitude of problems, a multitude of opportunities, whether it's employment or education. And because we have always been driven by education, personally, professionally, in our families, etc., we thought, how can we teach them? There's got to be some kind of tech out there that we can use to teach them English on their smart devices, be able to benchmark them, and then we can match them with jobs in countries that have employment opportunities for them. And the idea evolved from there and to where it is today.
I just want to add that when Mazen says that statement, when he said, look, Rana, if we do this together, we'd be unstoppable. It's not because we have some superhuman abilities. It's just that
Effort.
It's grit. It's being tenacious. It's believing in the purpose so much that it doesn't. The naysayers, we don't hear them.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and then we get up every morning with this drive that to get this job done, not for ourselves, but because I truly believe there are millions of people waiting, and we don't have time because these people are waiting to find jobs and improve themselves and uplift themselves. And that's, I believe Mazen and I were here for a purpose. I really believe the reason we met was for doing something with impact and doing something good.
You see, Dr. and I were just going to make some fun. Mazen, the Allah, you know, we should now begin to see, because it is reality. The power, whatever energy, power, God, Allah, whatever you think about, is a point of enlightenment.
Absolutely.
In the spiritual world, it is called the day of enlightenment. In your earlier look backs, you were waiting for the day of enlightenment to happen. If this happens, if that happens. Right. And then when you heard the speech, the enlightenment came in the present. And therefore, you were at that moment of the transformation of enlightenment. So it is the gift of the universe, God, energies that made you, both of you, give that superpower. I have looked at your business model in how you are doing it, and I have some interesting thought processes about it and questions about it. But the more important thing is looking back at both of your experiences, to an entrepreneur who wants to have a candy store, or to an entrepreneur who wants to is fascinated by, normally everybody is by foods, what would you be, say, some of the what not to do's in the businesses that you have now walked through the journey and have brought those under control over a period of time, which may help others to reduce that learning experience?
Very good question. I've been reflecting on that, and I'd like to, for my part, make it relatively simple. But I think these have been powerful lessons that I and we have learned in our journey. I would say the first one is, do not ignore your gut feel. If you've invested the right amount of time in learning about the business that you're going into, and you're faced with many choices and decisions, listen to your gut feel. So do not ignore your gut feel. The second would be, don't give unequal value to everybody's opinion. So just because somebody would share an opinion with you and you think they happen to be a successful person or somebody who has expertise on a specific topic, it is still their opinion. As an entrepreneur, if you choose to take on that journey, your opinion is actually equal, if not more, because at the end of the day, you're the person that has to act upon these. So treat everybody's opinion with equal measure. And I think the third one for me would be, don't ever give up. I mean, it's obviously, something that many entrepreneurs, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Actually, let me delete that and say, the third one is, do not underestimate how resourceful you can be in solving a problem. And I'll stop at that.
All right, I have some I'd like to share. So this is something I had to learn, is ask for help. So don't be afraid to ask for help or for guidance or an opinion. The other thing is, really listen to negative feedback. Even if initially you think it's unjustified or uncalled for, there's some learning there that you can really benefit from. So you need to step back and take a look at that. And the third one is burnout. You have to watch out for burnout. So taking a break isn't a selfish thing to do. It's actually necessary for you to be able to continue to keep giving, whether it's to your work or to your project or your family or what's important in your life. So actually taking care of yourself mentally and physically is a big part of you being able to continue to be successful. And then the last but very, very, very important is, do not let ego take over. Stay humble.
Well, humility is the basis of real learning, and it is the basis of learning and therefore the basis of success, right? Because when you learn, you modify, you adapt, and entrepreneurship is about adaptation to reality, right? So I think that comes from the feeling from being humble in every aspect of life. And humility doesn't necessarily mean surrender. Humility means I am humble to learn from you, and it creates that. And nothing about any feedbacks are considered negatives, just they are ego-based. When interpreted ego-based, they are negative. When interpreted humility, they are pure feedbacks,
Absolutely.
right?
Learning opportunities.
Right. So that just brings out the other aspect of it. There were in as you build your journeys, and you just shared of what not to do, and I have to tell you, if I was sitting in an MBA class and listening to you of what those were absolutely the most important things I would take home from that class, about what not to do in entrepreneurship. So thank you for, sort of putting them all together so succinctly. A part of you have done is a corporate world. You understand what corporate wealth is. Now you have the privilege of creating entrepreneurial wealth. Right? I will classify what you are doing at deployment as social entrepreneurship. You know,
Right.
there is a category that people have created, what is called as social entrepreneurship. And the reason that is under the entrepreneurship of social cause is because in order to give, you must have or you must make. You cannot give what you don't have. An entrepreneurship model allows you to have to give, right? So in the corporate world, it is different. So what are, if I was an entrepreneur listening to you in the difference or the gaps between corporate world and entrepreneurship, outline some of the things that you thought they were in entrepreneurship to the realities that you faced that don't exist from the dilemma or from the vision of as a corporate executive, because corporate wealth and entrepreneur wealth is different, and rarely does a person come into the interviews with both sides of experience. So I am going to ask you to outline that, because it is, so people are just, oh, the life in corporate world is easy, etc., etc. And so you are probably, between the two of you as a couple, absolutely in a perfect position to share that experience.
Thank you. Just to clarify, by corporate wealth, you're meaning that from a person's wealth perspective, individual.
Yeah, from a personal wealth, yes, yes, yes.
So I think it's a very interesting question, actually. I never thought of it that way. But obviously, you can have a very successful corporate career and create a lot of wealth for yourself, especially in certain sectors and highly rewarding jobs. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it's admirable, and many have done that. I think they're almost like two different languages. It's not about how many dollars you can have in the bank account, depending on which route you take, corporate wealth creation or entrepreneurial wealth creation, because you can argue that on either path you can generate the same amount of money. It's more of the nature of generating that. So corporate wealth is more about predictability and reliability. You have a salary, you have a certain expectation of how much of a raise you're going to get, certain expectation of what kind of bonus plan you're going to get, what your stock options might be worth if you're fortunate enough to have them. So you can almost forecast down to the dollar what you're going to be able to earn, which is great because it gives predictability and stability. Entrepreneurial wealth, on the other side, is completely the opposite, right? Zero stability, zero predictability, right? High risk, high reward, but it's a different, the nature of the journey is different, right? It's like almost a difference between, I'm not sure what the right analogy is, but it's a different, maybe it's like driving a manual transmission car and automatic. They're just different. It's both driving, it'll both get you to where you want to get. It's just how do you want to go through that? And of course, it depends on the underlying personality characteristics of the individual, of whether or not they can handle the unpredictability, uncertainty, and risk elements of the entrepreneurial journey versus the corporate journey. Not everybody's cut out to do either one of them. I personally believe there's natural gravitational tendencies from a personality perspective that someone is better suited for one versus the other, and it shouldn't be force fit. So that's my perspective.
So you were on the receiving end of that transition,
yeah,
from the corporate world, Dr. Rana, to as Mazen did his transformation, and it is a transformation. What were your experiences, and how would you suggest from an receiving end to handle, or to better to handle that kind of impact on your family life and on your social life? Because it definitely affects the social life also.
Yes, 100%. I think in the beginning, my relationship with money was always seen as because I was always in a profession where I provided a service. So I always saw myself as a servant to the patients that I had. And when there was wealth, they could afford the service. And then when they couldn't afford the service, it became a hindrance and an obstacle that my team and I fought. So although I worked in the private sector, we dealt with a lot of charities to ensure that our patients had the treatment that they needed. So the way I saw money was always I could see how it was always an obstacle, because a lot of the patients couldn't afford the services that we were providing. But I also believed, I've seen so many cases in the hospitals where it was seen as we will never be able to serve this patient because the funds are so high. But in my heart, I knew it would happen because there was a higher power that would eventually lead us down the road. It would just take some effort. So I think that's my relationship with wealth is that if you are meant to have it, it will come. You just have to do your best to get it. So yes, and being I was actually an employee, so I had a salary, and now being an employer, an entrepreneur, there's always a fluctuation and up and down. But in my heart, I believe that we try our best, and whatever we get, we make do, we do our best with. I'm not sure if that's the right answer.
Yes, it's one of what you're saying is there is a difference in the mental state when you sign on the check in the front or sign on the check in the back.
Be careful, Sanjeev. We're dating ourselves by recognizing what signing a check on the back means.
Of course.
But I think your point is very, the question is very well on point. The impact on the family and the social life of, especially when you go through the transition, right, is very, very, very significant and very hard. Right. And,
but I think as entrepreneurs, we've thickened our skin, so we have no problem with saying, look, the budget's really tight now.
But if you think back to Sanjeev's point, when I made that transition from the corporate to entrepreneurship, that was difficult, and we tried really hard to insulate the children, who were young teenagers at the time, from feeling any impact.
That's true.
Right. Which was incredibly difficult because it wasn't sustainable because there was no income at that point. You're just spending from whatever you have. But I think now, as they've grown to be young adults, we are more transparent with them in terms of those fluctuations, especially during these times like these that we're all living.
See, Mazen, a part of the transformation that you saw yourself into, right, is when you are in the corporate world, everybody is aligned with your vision, either as suppliers or as customers, or you work at it. So you think that when you get out, those people would be there for you. And that is always an assumption that doesn't hold good, because as soon as that power is taken away, that gap is wide and it's difficult to add up to. And then you, as a corporate executive, always had an infrastructure that was accessible to you to execute the plans you had. And now the infrastructure is you and Rana. That's it. That's the infrastructure now. At least, of course, as you build it.
It's like he was with us.
Yeah, I mean, you struck a chord with that, Sanjeev. I mean, you said that and you moved me. And I would say it's actually more profound than what you mentioned, at least in my experience, because I experienced that transition at multiple levels, not only from being corporate to an entrepreneur, but also in transitions between my corporate roles. So that stature and that, and so it's not just the loss of power, so to speak, but I believe it actually unbeknownst to you, when you're in the corporate world, it goes to your identity. So I experienced it the first time when I left my last role with IBM. So I was an IBM executive, senior manager, whatever the title is, in the US and then here in the Middle East. And as I left them and went to join a startup, the individuals that were more than happy to answer my phone calls literally the week before would not answer my phone call.
That's a phone call.
A week before, what car I was driving, which was the same, didn't matter because I had an IBM business card. The week after, they would first look at my car and my dress and everything else to try to figure out how important I am or not. Yes. So that was an interesting transition that I didn't see coming, right? Because it actually made...
You didn't know. You didn't know.
You don't know. Right? You don't know. You grew up in the corporate world. Okay, this is who you are.
It becomes your identity.
It becomes part of your identity. So actually it causes you to question your identity. Is Mazen defined as this role within a company, or am I defined as who I am as an individual?
So we go back to ego as well.
And then the second transition of going from that to being an entrepreneur, or to your point, you have significantly less resources available at you, and you basically have to build everything your own, which I think is especially the case for bootstrap entrepreneurs.
Sure.
Where it's you basically do everything. So I always used to say there isn't a job in our current business that we have not done ourselves, from the accounting, bookkeeping, to making the sandwiches, to ordering inventory, because when you start, you don't have the resources.
Of course. And although you should get the resources in the cash generating mode, you're not able to create that. It's easy to say, but sometimes they say, in order for you to leverage your capabilities best, you outsource or you bring the capabilities that are not important to you. I want to move on to employment, because I think that there is a significant value that you are driving, and there is the your business model has a significant drive for everybody to participate in it. And please don't take this the wrong way when I share some of the things with you, because my purpose from an outsider and getting to know you is to create the maximized value of your efforts and your enterprise and your existence in that. I always believe that we as entrepreneurs do not really understand what swimming up the Niagara or swimming down the river is, because we believe that unless we face the difficulties and we take on the challenges, that success is not going to come easy. And it takes an outsider to take a look at it and saying, hey, if you put your sails this way, you will go down the river much easily, kind of thought process. So in your employment platform, as you called it, where you are providing to the 600 million people, as you put it, and 40% in different parts of the world are making less than $50 a day, as in your analysis of that you have stated. A part of your value proposition is to give them the tools like teaching English and skills. And that comes from your IT background, because you know that how to put it together. And from yours is the human angle, which is absolutely perfect. If I am from the outside, please look at me and say, okay, you're charging whatever $50 per month or something like that fees. And your model currently is that you provide them, if they get a job, then you provide them a certain feedback from that, and you allow 5 or 6 of their families to learn and to make, which is a very intelligent marketing, as I might put it there in that manner.
Yeah.
The question that I have is, are you making this a market pull or a market push? and there is lies the difference of the business model. And because we have a little bit of time constraint, which I respected your time, I wanted to get to you and make and ask and think about it, because it's important. uh, you are changing the world. Definitely you have chosen a way to educate the platform and get the people. If I am and then if the question that people you have asked yourself is, do I lose the money, if I don't get the job? And you say we cannot guarantee the job because we don't know that. And I'm taking away from my main topic of entrepreneurship, but it's important because as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
change. So the thing that if you look at, part of the difference between the market pull and the market push is that you are currently training the people and you're taking oaths from the employers to, bring quality and high salary, good salaries and fair treatments and stuff like that.
I have to stop you and I've been dying to say this. I commend you on your research. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I forgot that we'll put all that information out there. So fantastic. Sorry, carry on with your question. Just absolutely phenomenal. Sorry, I had to say that.
I mean, the whole, your whole philosophy that is that I am going to give you a fishing rod, then I'm going to give you a fish. That's all.
Spot on.
So a part of that, if you turned around, because when people create exits, they always put a mirror at the end and look back, what could I have done before to drive an exit? So if I put a similar mirror, what could I have done to create momentum in this social entrepreneurship?
Right.
What I would look at, and I'm happy to share more details with you, is I would go to somebody like the Berkshire Hathaways or the funds and say, here is what I am going to do. Or go to the corporate for the well-being and say, sponsor this social entrepreneurships for $1 million, $500,000, 100,000, 50,000 a year. And in return for your sponsorship, I will give you quality employees. Now, you have give that income to the people who finish the training. Right. Rather than taking $1 from them, and whatever the numbers are. Right. If you finish the training on the platform, now there is a force of attraction for you that those people want. You are now creating for them a revenue center rather than a cost center.
For the candidates.
For the finding candidates. Yeah. And then the corporations that are funding that source of the possibilities, because they want to do the impact, because you're a platform, because you are creating the change, right?
Right.
You are going to get a market pull of that jobs automatically, rather than trying to do the reverse way, which I call as the market push. I wanted to share that with you because the same tool of instrument would create a huge growth of people base and a segment of employment based on the needs of the specific corporate that would sponsor. And then you would just rapidly catch fire, because now you become a source of income for all those people that finish your course. That's just a thought process I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
And I just need you to know that it actually means a lot to us that you shared that perspective. And to Rana's earlier point that don't take negative feedback, you apologized at the beginning before sharing your perspective. And there is never a need to apologize to us, because we welcome all the feedback. We want the critical feedback, not the accolades. We want the critical feedback, right? So this is a perfect example of that, and what Rana was mentioning before. So agree 100% with everything that you're saying. Okay, there's a couple of nuances, right? So in terms of the strategy of working with the corporates for sponsorships and employment, that is already part of part of our go-to-market strategy for a number of reasons. Not only what you mentioned, but also because there's a high degree of cynicism in the populations that we're addressing, because unfortunately, historically, there's been a lot of potential fraudulent schemes and abuse, right? So they're going to think, oh, just another somebody trying to make $1 from me, right?
Of the poor people, out of the poor people, whatever their words are, yes.
Right? And so that is, in our business model, that is probably our biggest bottleneck. We know we are good people. We know the employers we're going after will, as we say, inshallah, God willing, be good people and have signed up to this pledge, as you mentioned, phenomenally from your research, because that sets a mindset. It is not contractual, but it's a mindset set. So 100% with you agree. But there's one part that we respectfully disagree. It's not about disagreeing, it's just like our perspective of why we did that. And it's actually, I don't know if you will come closer, just come closer to me. Okay, that on that wall, okay, it's a number of our values and principles that we live by.
And a lot of them what Mazen says all the time.
Rana put it up for one of my birthdays, and the first one says, free is worthless. Okay, so this is a principle that we believe in, that something that is free is worthless. Okay, and unfortunately, in the populations that we're dealing with, who might have been habituated to a lot of handouts, a lot of people giving them fish versus a fishing rod and teaching them how to fish. We might not get the participation that we're looking, because there's effort required from them. We need them to put in the time to learn English, to better their skills, to attend the job interviews, to follow up on the job offers that they will get, right? It's not just a handout. And so having a nominal fee that's been benchmarked against the average income levels as being affordable, not putting them in pain
or more burden
by doing that, in contrast to the ecosystem that we're disrupting of traditional recruitment agencies, where they would have to go.
Oh, absolutely correct.
$900
on average, $900
and take loans from loan sharks and all kinds of.
Oh yes,
right.
Yes.
So just to have enough skin in the game for them, and
sure.
by the time they get a job from us or through us, let me say that, then the ROI financially for them is phenomenal.
No, absolutely
phenomenal. And to your point of bringing the people onto the platform, I just want to for your background, so to speak, or your knowledge, our intent initially was not that. Right? Our intent was we wanted to take that placement fee that we charge the employer, that we're now passing back to the candidate.
Yes.
In the form of free subscriptions to the platform, other members of their community. Our original intent was to try to use that money to pay for one of their children's primary school education. Unfortunately, it becomes extremely problematic to administer that.
Because you don't.
In the geographies that we're talking about. How do you pay for a public school, and how do you make sure it's a legitimate school? And it becomes very problematic. So we moved away from that, but we replaced that because we wanted to link the benefit, the uplifting benefit, to the next generation somehow. So what we've done, and it's not in the public information that you might have found, is we're establishing an Eduployment scholarship, which we're funding with 2.5% of our revenues, and whereby any candidate that gets hired through Eduployment may come back and apply for that scholarship, and if they get it, one of their children's complete college tuition would be paid by Eduployment.
Correct.
Right? To carry that. So apologies.
I
you got more detail than you asked for.
No, the reason, and I want to understand, and we can talk about it later.
I'd love to get your perspective.
The reason that I asked for that thought process is not that you pay them on a monthly or pay them on completion, is because foundations, US foundations, will provide you the resources for educating, uplifting the education backgrounds of such people, and you only pay them whatever. I mean, it's you of course we understand that anything that is free is used, but it is not free because they have to finish the work. They have to finish come and get learned on it. And at the end of the thing, it's like their graduation fees that
Right.
they get. And if they live in between, because you would get an ability to penetrate the foundations that you are. So that's the other side of the equation.
100% correct. We've already had a couple of initial
Yeah,
conversations with some foundations that
right.
are happy.
And I, and I think that you will.
And again, yeah, if you have
That
any
would be very
referrals,
helpful.
I mean, would love to
Yeah,
speak
we'll
to you.
talk about that. I just
We'll talk
wanted
about that
you to
offline
take a
because
look at
there's
that, because
a lot
this is just the beginning of our partnership and relationship.
100% agree, because for us, we see the future is limitless. We're even already in mind have programs
Because
for
you
like
have to have it scalable. You have to have it scalable, as you know, Mr. Corporate World, now Mr. Entrepreneur. So you have to have it, we have to make it scalable. And only thing that can make social entrepreneurship scalable is the ease of access to capital, because that's what it's going to, and we can talk about that. I have asked you a lot of questions, and you have been so generous with your time and wisdom to share that. This is your opportunity to ask me questions that you feel I might help you sharing whatever is been in the background, that is me.
What inspired you to put together this book? Would be my first question.
Okay. So, there are thousands and thousands of books and videos about what to do in entrepreneurship. And yet, as entrepreneurship grows because of the success stories of a few, everybody sees building unicorns, right? And it is especially a Silicon Valley, sort of phenomenon. And entrepreneurship then should really, in my opinion, and I'm going to answer your question, should be classified as the glamour entrepreneurship, which is the Silicon Valley kind, and the grit entrepreneurship, which is really what you and I do every day of our lives.
Yeah.
So there are more percent, 99.9% is grit entrepreneurship, and maybe 0.1% of the entrepreneurial base is, this sort of the Silicon Valley entrepreneurship, right? Glamour entrepreneur. I call it glamour because, it is glamorized,
Yes, exactly.
Right. So the reason that, and in that 99+%, the entrepreneurship is really an art of success. You do the learnings, you make the things, and you maybe 1 into 10, and you become a number. So therefore, all entrepreneurs work equally hard. So what is that doesn't allow them to move the needle of success? And you became a wonderful human being. So did Rana, became by the parents telling her what not to do. So a part of the experience or the knowledge of what not to do, that people would know. I wish I had that when I built my companies, rather than going in the job and learning on the job. That way, we can refocus our energies more on the probabilities of success. So the purpose of my book is to transform the art of entrepreneurial success to the science of entrepreneurial successes, therefore enhancing and moving the needle of creating wealth through entrepreneurship.
That is wonderful, and I have to say your classification of the entrepreneurial space into the glamour entrepreneur versus grit entrepreneur really resonates with us, right? Because obviously we come from the grit side.
Can you still hear?
Yes.
Yeah, and and I think and I'd love to have some offline chats with you about this, because it's a really fascinating topic. Because I think the glamour entrepreneurs, as you stated, they also work quite as hard, but they're working on different things. They're working on valuations and pitch decks, and next acquisition and next fundraise and what have you. But there's nothing wrong with that. They're just a different game.
Different kind of.
But unfortunately, it skews the perspective of the grit entrepreneur.
That's correct.
So
And there are more singles and doubles in the baseball than there are home runs, you know.
yes, and that's the
So
bread and butter. And I think
that's
that's
the
what
product.
globally all economies need is more the grit entrepreneurs, mom and pop, SME,
Correct.
whatever you want to call them,
Correct.
right? They're the foundation of the economy, and we need to make sure that it's healthy. It's a healthy foundation, and
Sure.
they're not distracted by glamour.
Rana, I would ask, I of course want to give you the same privilege of asking any of the things that are on your mind.
I think I would love to ask you what you would tell us to be careful of now in this journey with eduployment. What to watch out for?
Great question.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. And I sort of looked at back when I was doing this stuff is what could I do differently, rather nothing right or wrong, just differently to be able to create that, a transformation. And a part of the thing is the image that the world has about you should be more built in, because and obviously, Mazen has the your back covered. Mazen has your back covered. And as a woman, if you look at and that doesn't take away from Mazen, by the way, but as a woman, the spirit that you have is far more emotional and passionate than the same if I put the same hat from an outside perspective point of view. So making is, for example, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, right? Her passion as compared to anybody else just comes out because people attach that to the inside caringness that is the woman. If you were able to align that and say that is the purpose of your social entrepreneurship, and drive that with my friend Mazen as the infrastructure enabling that, you would create a tremendous amount of awareness and therefore more attractiveness to including the corporate sides and including the foundations, because now you are truly the woman's heart to changing the world. And I'm not taking it away anything from the heart of my friend there.
That is so profound, Sanjeev. Thank you. I know she's speechless because you made her emotional.
So
That is wonderful. That is such an amazing and wonderful perspective that we, in all honesty, we've overlooked highlighting. Even though Rana's title is, she's our Chief Purpose Officer, okay, and she is the keeper of that flame, right? And your message, I'm just giving you time to recover, and your message is basically to bring that out.
yes,
and leverage that.
that is a level of credibility will give you instantaneous credibility in the corporate world. And you need, in order to achieve your mission and accelerate it as a booster, you are on a launching platform. You need to have these boosters to get, and create what you want to do the change in. So thank you.
So
Thank
profound. Thank you so much. That was so incredible.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity, and we will be in touch.
I would sincerely love to keep in touch. If you don't mind, we'll reach out to you from time to time.
Of course.
If you're generous enough with your time, would love
Thank
to
you so
have more conversations. Really appreciate it.
Good
Have a great
afternoon.